Good afternoon. Okay. Now we're ready for our third roundtable for the day. African Studies at Howard, reflecting on our scholarly legacy. I am pleased to have an opportunity to facilitate a panel of such distinguished faculty during our 70th anniversary. In an effort to continue the work and build upon the intellectual legacies of E. Franklin Frazier, Leo Hansberg, retired faculty, and in memoriam of Selimon Yang, we will embark upon a conversational journey about our department's history and best practices in charting a new and revolutionary pathway forward. We cannot ignore Howard's colonial origins, the bravery of our architectural pillars, former colleagues, staff, and students in their fight to establish an intellectual space to study the historical and contemporary global contributions of Africa. Nor can we ignore our responsibility in carrying the baton of offering educational experiences that continue to center the importance of African history, culture, and intellectual thought. One cannot speak of world history without speaking about Africa. There is no world history or profitable future without it. Let's talk about it. So first, I'm going to have the panelists take a few minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, to introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are, your positions here at Howard, areas of research, and current projects at Howard and beyond, and then we'll get to some juicy questions.
Good afternoon to everyone. Sure. My name is Lezmore Emmanuel. There is no westernization in my name. Lezmore means that when war is coming, I receive with my left hand. And Lamia means that I'm surrounded by friends and foes. So my father deleted any Western in my name, and that has followed me to today. I'm a professor of digital and media communications in the Cassie Hughes School of Communications here at Howard. But I am an affiliate faculty of African Studies. I publish mainly in African Studies because from 146 BC, people came and named us, including the name of Africa. It's a problem, including my country. I am originally from a country that Portuguese called Cameroon. Therefore, I don't use the name Cameroon. I've never said I'm from Cameroon. Because up till now, if we don't have the courage, we change that name. Like my brother did with Burkina Faso and others, Sankara. Why should I give myself that division? The 15th faculty at Daystar University in Kenya, Nairobi, and also the 15th faculty at Makerere University in Kampala Industry. I'm a 15th faculty member of the University of Ghana, and of course, University of Montreal, in what you call Cameroon. What am I dealing with? I'm dealing with this thing called the decolonization and the de-westernization of mediated communication for Africans. All of you on WhatsApp. But why don't we own WhatsApp Africa? Why are we always secondary? Why are we always falling behind when mankind started in Africa? When civilization started in Africa? That is the subject of my new book that is coming up in February, titled Black Race in Single Thought, because there's one human race, Black race, and the white supremacy side, and I'm changing that. I am dealing with the ancestries. So race is a cultural construct. We should listen to whenever I'm affiliated to African studies. We're talking about the white race and Black race, Asian, and nothing like that. There is one human race, and that was Black. It was migration. that cause climate change related to prevention to different. It's not infinite. 18. What do you think about my reflection of African culture?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Florlace Garrett, and my name means flower. But in Africa, particularly South Africa, my colleagues don't know this, people call me Ingwe, which means small one. So I started my career doing my dissertation research in South Africa. And then when I came to Howard, I started doing research in the Gambia and also Nicodemus in Kansas, here in the United States. I'm an anthropologist, and within American anthropology, there's 4 subfields. I cover 2 of them, cultural anthropology, and I'm an archaeologist. With my archaeologist hat on, I look at the period in Africa right before colonialization, and then into exchange and trade and the colonial period. And then I look at the up until the Reconstruction period in the United States. With my cultural anthropological hat on, I do environmental studies, heritage management, tourism. I look at the meaning of heritage sites in the diaspora, and how it links Africa to many of its descendants. In the Gambia, in particular, I've been doing research at Kunta Kinte Island, which is well known for being a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was also a very important site in the transatlantic slave trade, and it became very well known for Alex Haley's research on the book, The Roots, the Saga of the American Family. But I look at how archaeology, heritage, and tourism actually helps form a link in terms of identity in the African diaspora. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. I guess I will be talking more about it after my colleagues.
Good afternoon. So my name is Esther Mukewa Lisansa. I'm assistant professor in the Department of African Studies. I do research in African education, African languages, indigenous knowledge, women empowerment in Africa, and especially in literary text. So right now, I'm working on 2 very important projects. One of them is looking at the language policy in Africa. It's an edited book. And we are looking at language policy on at least 30 African countries. And I'm also working on a monograph, which is about African indigenous knowledge and African languages in East Africa. And in particular, we are looking at 3 communities in East Africa, Swahili, Kamba, and Kikuyu. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I'm going to stop there, and I'll talk about whatever I'm doing later on. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bai Chan. I'm a professor in the Department of African Studies. Before I go further, I just want to apologize for not being here this morning. I had to do Grandpa Judy. But it was the grandparents' day today at school. So till midday, so I was able to make the afternoon panel, the late afternoon panel here. It's good to be here and to see everybody, particularly the alumni. I see many of you here, and I want to impersonate Sterling Brown here in the film that Heidi Griego made on him back in the 80s. Where they were celebrating him, and he started by saying, well, it's good to see all of these students here, but to put them at ease that, you know, he's not going to ask them for the paper that they owe him. And I think I would also say that, you know, I hope you're not going to ask me for that paper that you submitted to me. But anyway, I work basically in the area of literature and film, basically in the area of culture and development, looking at the cultural dimensions of development and also the ways in which these products of the imagination work as different bodies of discourse on some of the basic issues and questions and challenges that we are looking at from different disciplinary perspectives in the humanities, in the social sciences, and related areas there. So my work focuses basically on the links that exist between the oral traditions, written traditions in Africa, and the visual traditions, basically cinema, and the ways in which these functions, not only as pieces of art, but also as commentaries, as interventions in terms of history, in terms of politics, in terms of economics, and so on and so forth. Yeah. My geographic areas of concentration are basically West Africa and South Africa in particular, and also in the Caribbean. And I also do a little bit of work on the African diaspora here in the United States. So basically, those are some of the areas that I am interested in, and many of my publications and work sort of revolve around those areas and issues and questions. And currently, I'm at the tail end of completing 2 documentary films. So.
Hello. Hello. Excuse me. Hello. My name is Adam Hailey. I want, by way of the African tradition, I want to relate how I got here to show you my relevance here. When I'm from Ethiopia, and there is this quote I like from attributed to Frederick the Great. He said, 60 or 70% of life depends on faith, which is contrary to the Western paradigm. But he said, as you grow older, you find 70 or 80% of it. That defines my presence here. We applied to ESAID, and I didn't expect to get the scholarship. In 1 week, we got the scholarship, and we went to the US Embassy, a friend of mine and myself. And the person who worked there told us, you're going to go there, go to school for 2 years, and you have to come back. I said, good. So we did not expect it, did not allowed to marry an American. And both of us looked at each other. Why? He said, because we want you to come back home. And we left who wants to stay in America. And so 2 years passed, 3 years passed, a number of years. That's when I became African American. And one incident related to that. When I first came here, the first city I saw was Washington, D.C. I fell in love with Washington, D.C. Our school in New York, we thought it was New York City. They told us it was outside of New York. We said, oh, it might be 10 minutes drive. It's upstate New York, which is 4 or 5 hours drive. And for an African to go there in the middle of the winter from probably like. I want to say a few words because to describe many of the things we're going to discuss by way of what African studies is. One of the draws for me to Howard was what we all believed to be a story of a guy called Melakourian. He was the first physician to be trained in an American university. And he came here almost 100 years ago, in the 20s. And the interesting story about him was not only was he in love with Howard, but he was friends with, I see, his great daughter here, who is Johannes Berry, many of the professors here were very much interested in Africa and formed the Ethiopian Research Council, which became the active movement fighting fascism, Italian fascism. They formally galvanized African Americans in New York, in Chicago, raised money, and it was huge. That was my first consciousness of the connection between Africa and the African diaspora. I hope we have a chance to discuss the other aspects of African studies and the foundations to it. But this is my story to explain how I got here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So for the first question, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. For the first question, building upon a rich academic legacy, how should African studies train future scholars to reclaim Africa's rightful space as a major contributor to world history and civilization? Yes.
I thought that was so long. I think this is what is related to the introduction I gave. Before we talk about what should be the future, we should briefly look at the foundations of African studies. And that is connected to the history of Africa, the study of Africa, the role of the African diaspora in studying Africa, and the role of HBCUs in shaping this. And you see how the African experience expressed by the diaspora continued in its culture, in its language, in its spiritualism, in its knowledge, in its education. And Howard was the exemplary institution that developed the model of higher education, which you broke from the mainstream model, which was the ivory tower model. The ivory tower model of the university and Harvard, the Yale's, was a detached university that pursued knowledge for its own sake, pure knowledge, and would be concerned with the events, conditions, or any issues in the community, the nation, or the world. And Howard changed that, and as HBCUs, as people of African descent. So you see, when it was formed over 150 years ago, the basis had been laid by the continuity of culture among the diaspora, by the spiritualism you see in the African culture, by how the institutions of learning were connected to knowledge building that valued culture, that valued ethics, and concern for justice, for democracy as part of the educational process. So here was an institution that was engaged in what was going on here and in the world. You had, as early, the early times, like to repeat again, when Italy had attacked Ethiopia, the institutions here, many of the scholars here, showed how they were concerned with what was going on. This continued with concerns of imperialism, colonialism, fascism. This was expressed by institutions that were formed here to advocate, to advance knowledge, not detached from the lives of people here in the world. But that's part of it. You had when fascism was rising in Europe, you had the eugenics movement here that had racist overtones. In fact, they say Hitler was a plagiarist. If he hadn't been a plagiarist, if he had put in his book in my camp, the sources of his criticism, you would have said, you would have exposed people who are positive to the idea of the pure race. But Howard, many scholars here, fought the eugenics movement, fought the racist ideas, fought the movements of imperialism, colonialism. And this was done here repeatedly in politics, in culture, in the economy. In culture, you see people like Elaine Lake showing how the other aspects of human knowledge, the culture, the literature, the knowledge, is part of the human condition. And that's important for building institutions, for building world peace. So these were the foundations of African studies. We'll have a chance to mention the luminaries who laid the basis for it until 70 years ago. It was formally institutionalized as African studies. But this is what should be the basis for the future, where engagement with the populations is not just the classroom, not the textbooks, but how they were involved with other members of the community, with the civic groups, with movements here, with Pan-Africanist movements, with liberty movements, or with anti-colonial, anti-apartheid movements. So this is the model that has been adopted now. This has influenced the anti-nuclear movements. And authoritarian movements were brought down. I remember when communist authoritarian regimes were brought down, which they overcome was sung in movements in Eastern Europe when they were bringing down authoritarian in Beijing. So you see how the education here, the scholars here, and those who are produced afterwards spread around the world, integrating this, coming together with Africans here who came in and who became friends with Johnsbury, with the other members here, who became leaders in Ghana, in Nigeria, in many parts of the world. So I think in short, this is how I understand it as the basis for both building knowledge and being engaged in local community and global transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Would anyone else like to respond to that question?
Well, let me just say that I think Cairo has really captured, in very distinct ways here, the sort of historical legacy foundation on which much of what we're doing today and possibly going in the future will be built on. And one can also maybe reflect back more recently, back in the 60s, particularly in terms of African studies, the seminal role that folks from Harvard played in terms of shaping the foundations, some of the established conventions and orthodoxies that were sort of reigning at the time in terms of perspectives on African studies, paradigms on Africa and the Black experience. When this major conference took place in Montreal, in Canada, where Black folks from Howard, Ron Walters, Leah Lamas, and I believe actually Lynch did mention a couple of other folks from Howard here, Joe Harris, I think Bob Collins, who was director of the program here for a long time, was also part of that group that descended into Montreal and part in this African Studies Association meeting, and really dropped a bombshell there that began to shake the foundations of the association in ways that spawned different sort of thinking and perspectives going forward. And also, I think, marked the beginning of the Association for the Study of African American Heritage, the African American
Heritage Studies.
Africans,
African Heritage Studies Association.
Africans, thank you, Mary. My mind is working over time here. So anyway, yeah, so I think some of those sort of pioneering moves on the part of folks that were here at Howard, again, building on that much earlier legacy of enhancement, associations, and the murder takes and so on and so forth. I'm really going to so we need to be cognizant of some of those presidents in order to be able to begin to chart forward in ways that will continue to build on these perspectives, bring new paradigms, new ways of speaking, new ways of describing and understanding and talking about Africa and its vast diaspora. And I think what is unfolding here at Harvard today is quite quite interested in a lot of things. We have folks coming back home, so to speak, people who have really marked their disciplinary areas in very, very fundamental ways. And one of the new people that we have on board recently is our own MA graduate here back in the 70s, who is back now home as chair of the English department here at Harvard, Dr. Carol West Davis, who when you talk about gender, feminism, and new sort of perspectives, not just in literature, but in terms of humanities and social sciences. Her work is really very, very prominent out there, and she is back here. And I think this is part of the legacy, building on the legacy that our forefathers, foremothers and our sort of pioneers have established, which is quite interesting. And this is such a vast area, and so many achievements here, so many fundamental changes in the field that we are witnessing that had their sort of nucleus, their seeds here at Howard in ways that were probably not quite visible, not quite apparent to a lot of people. But we can sort of detail some of those, particularly in the areas of trying to connect Africa and its broader diaspora. I think the sort of things that Howard have contributed in that particular effort are just amazing. And the injection of these categories of that were sort of marginalized in some of the dominant discourse. And here I'm referring particularly as an example, for example, the letter that a person like Innocent there wrote in 1956 to the chair of the French Communist Party, Maurice Torres, resigning from the Communist Party because, again, at that moment, during the time of colonialism and the anti-colonial struggle, a lot of African and diaspora intellectuals were somewhat affiliated with these radical movements, particularly the Communist Party in Europe, because they saw them as somewhat as allies. Okay. And but what was missing in the communist perspective was the question of colonialism. And this is what Emmanuel pointed out and really brought to the fore and began to inject that particular perspective in the reigning discourses there, in the reigning anti-establishment discourses there. And from that point on, we began to see, again, the issue of race, for example, also coming in, and later on the question of gender and so on and so forth. So, these are things that I think people from Howard in particular and other parts of the Black diaspora contributed significantly to, and elements that sort of constitute the basis for which we can begin to move forward in terms of projecting for different features as far as African studies and ways of looking at Africa and its diaspora as are concerned.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chang and Dr. Hyde, and to add on what you've already said, especially building on the legacy. I'm looking back at the kind of research which I'm doing right now, And I believe we need to go back to whom we are or who we were before others started defining who we are. And I'm thinking about our African indigenous knowledge. How can we build on that legacy? That legacy in most cases is marginalized. It was marginalized from 1884 henceforth or even before. How can we send that into our solutions? Because I believe the African people hold solutions to the problems which are in the society. There's no problem which is new to Africa. And African people have always known how to solve whatever problem it is. I know most of you remember about the COVID-19 outbreak and the projections which were there that will be collecting Africans on the streets. But thank God it didn't happen. The African people went back to their roots. I know those who go to Africa, you came across people using apps when the outbreak took place. So this shows African people have solutions to their problems. They did not need Western medicine because it wasn't there. If it was there, it was too expensive for everybody. But people went back to their roots. And right now, as I'm speaking with the indigenous knowledge, people, especially those who are practicing herbal medicine, and I'm not talking about, we like calling them, okay, that's what colonialism told us. They are weak doctors. They are not weak doctors. They are spiritual doctors. So I've been talking to them. I've been talking to herbalists who are, as we know, they are not weak doctors, but I'm trying to get that knowledge from them and try to document that, because it's important. And something which has really surprised me, the many diseases which the West has told us they are not curable. What I'm getting from the herbalist, there's no disease which cannot be cured by herbs. So the solution, the problems, the issues African people are facing, they have the solution to that. And I'm thinking about the pools which we are getting and so forth and so forth. Why can we go back and see how our people solve whatever issues were there? And in one of my classes, we are reading, and I know most of us we've read Sundiata and Ethical Old Man. And you know what that old kingdom was able to achieve. They get the solutions. Sundiata had the solution with his people. So why can't we go back to our people and get to know what they have to say? And I'm thinking about the many development projects which have been brought to Africa and they failed. Why can't we go back to what Africans had and try to build on that? And some people are already doing that, and it's working. How many of you are familiar with TASSA irrigation scheme in West Africa? TASSA, T-A-S-S-A, is one of the irrigation projects which are taking place in West Africa. That scheme has worked for years. Why can't we build on that? Why can't we build on what already Africa has? So if we are really serious about building on legacy, we need to build on our indigenous knowledge, because we have the solution. Think of anything. This one, and I'm so thankful I came to Howard. Having the opportunity to interact and to read the kind of scholarship which is found here, it made me to think out of the box. I was not so much into indigenous knowledge, but it kept me thinking, what can our people contribute to whatever issues we are dealing with? And that's why right now I see indigenous knowledge among our people, because it has worked. So to build on this wonderful legacy, let's not imagine the West holds the solution. Even us who are in the diaspora, don't think you hold the solution. People back in Africa, they have the solution. Talk to them. give them a voice which no one can give them. And the best, the wonderful thing is, each one of us here has a connection to Africa. No matter your color, we all originated from Africa. Give those people a voice. Graduate students, when we go to work to Africa, we always keep on telling my students, give the people a voice. Let them tell you they are strong. Don't imagine you know what they need. Even those who will be policymakers soon, our graduate students and alumni, soon you'll be policymakers. Please make a point to let the government, whichever government you are working with, let the people have a voice. Let them tell you what you think works for you in this particular setting. For me, having to speak with the herbalist and other indigenous knowledge people, I've gained so much. And of course, being who I am, doing research in African languages, we also need to give a voice to African languages.
Yes.
You can't claim to be an Africanist when you can't speak a single African language, surely. We need to empower these languages as well. And this reminds me about the Asmara conference, which took place in 2000 in Eritrea, where scholars from all across the globe who have interest in African issues and especially languages and literatures, they gathered there. And one of the things they did, they declared they want African languages to speak on behalf of the continent. And I just mentioned we are working on a handbook on language policies in Africa. It's all sad what I'm seeing from the third countries which we are getting reports on. The ex-colonial languages are still speaking for Africa. We need to empower our languages so that they speak on our behalf. I'm so thankful, at least African Union and UN is recognizing Kiswahili. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Swahili speaker. It doesn't matter even if it was to be which language. If it's widely spoken, if it's an African language, I would support that 100%. Because I would like to see an African language speaking on our behalf. I know we have a long way to go, but at least we've started the first step, the second step. And something which I want really to acknowledge is the role which African Americans played in empowering African languages here in the US. If it wasn't for African Americans, Swahili won't even be where it is now, to tell you the truth. Because they demanded a language which they can associate with. So thank you so much for my African American brothers and sisters. You are making us proud. And this brings me back to the point which Dr. Haidu and Dr. Chan mentioned. We need collaboration. The African people from the continent and Africans in the diaspora, we need to work together. And you saw what happened in the 60s with Pan-Africanism, what our people were able to achieve. We can still do that. And in one of my classes, we were reading about the dilemma of a ghost. How many of you have read that? Nice, we have one. Nice. So the book brings in, we have a character who goes back to Africa, and actually she got married in Africa. And we were trying to talk about the relationship between Africans on the continent and African Americans. We're talking about that relationship. And something which we did and we declared in that particular class, we need collaboration. It doesn't matter where African people, people of African descent are, we need to work together. And remember the colonizer or the people who enslaved us, they wanted us to live as divided. They didn't want the people in the diaspora to know how Africa was doing. Neither did they want the colonizer did not want us, those who were in Africa, to know what African Americans were doing in the West. I was surprised when I came to this country as a graduate student to be about Martin Luther King, to be about Malcolm X, and all these Rosa Parks. I did not have anything. I grew up in Kenya. I did not have anything about African Americans doing anything great. And that broke my heart. And I challenge each one of us, please take a moment to educate people wherever you are. You can even visit Africa, you can, and also in one way or the other, invite whoever it is to, and in so many ways, with technology you can communicate with people. What I'm trying to say is, we need to collaborate as one. And African Studies Department has shown that, yes. We come from different backgrounds, but we have one agenda, our African people, no matter where they are. So that collaboration, building on our legacy, we have to do it. Let me stop there.
Needs to acknowledge Dr. Carr. There's a Robert, did you want to introduce you with Dr. Carr? Everyone.
I already did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to make sure you get that opportunity.
Oh, yeah, you got one, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, Chair, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. Greg Carr, Department of African Studies here at Howard, and been 23 years, and thank you to Dwight for the invitation. I know we were at the 60th anniversary with Dr. Chom. I always got to thank him. This is my brother, broke me in when I came. African Studies, he's like, I'm gonna show you the ropes. Always did. 10 years ago, I guess it was, when we were there for the 60th, Dr. Chom put together a group. My kind of classmates, those who came, I came in around the same time. Of course, Brother Halu and Siama Azode, my colleague there, we kind of came in around the same time. And then we all put the center together. Dr. Chom got everybody out on this campus that did anything even remotely close to Africa and put it together in the grant, gave birth to this center. So thank you always for that, brother. And on the 60th, I see Bob Ecker back there. 3 of us. Who else? I don't know. Let me think. Who else? So that was going in with Suleiman, because I was sitting right next to him that whole time. No question. That was the hero. Okay, now you're looking for him. When I first did the interview, I came looking for Suleiman. That was the name I knew in African Studies because I read his work. Of course, everybody had. As Dr. Chom used to always say, you know, it's the first thing you say in African Studies. You say, "I'm in African Studies at Howard." That's Howard Suleiman. And Howard Dotson. Yeah, we were on that panel, and I know, and I'll end with this, and then however the conversation's flowing to that. I remember that day we talked about the birth of African Studies here at Howard, and Professor Kumar, of course, good to see you, brother. And I'm thinking about the framing we had that conversation, and part of that framing was around the evasion. And I see Sister Hansberry there. The evasion, who was there that day, the evasion of William Leo Hansberry. This department was born out of evasion. Northwestern got that money. Ford Foundation, they gave Howard a little bit of money because he couldn't get around not giving any money. The Negroes on this campus, Elaine Lockett and Frank Frazier, and figured out a way to evade William Leo Hansberry. And I think the history of African Studies on this campus in this department, and I do not think that we need to have everything crowded up in one Black department. I wish the president of the university was here right now, because this whole African diaspora, Malaj, whatever these white folks doing, and we're gonna try to copy, I'm afraid. We need to shut that down right now, because the departmental integrity model, in other words, we all know we ain't building no liberation practice at no university, Black, white, or polka dot. At best, we're trying to manage to have to steal some resources out of these places to go to the real places, which is what Prophet Church you're talking about. But in the process, we talked about how the evasion of Hansberry allowed Howard to begin this department, and ever since then, finally, the people in this department have been waging an intellectual war to do exactly that, to use those resources to go for our liberation. Because last I checked, Professor Bahar, you had politics. We don't have any policy department anymore because Negroes make terrible decisions. But we're talking about all about that.
Great, because I think we're going to, I'm gonna ask two questions and you all can choose to answer how you best see fit in the order that you like. But it appears we're going backwards with the rising tide of anti-Black, anti-African, anti-woke, and anti-critical race theory rhetoric, leading to the banning of books and misrepresented narratives in grades K through 12 and across college campuses around the country. What courses and experiential learning opportunities can African studies add to the curriculum to counteract this attempt to conceal Black guilt at the expense of Black world history and advancement? That's question one, which goes along with question two. How can the Departments of Afro-American and African Studies, while maintaining their distinctive disciplines, partner in developing initiatives that foster a pan-African spirit of solidarity in our ongoing fight against global white supremacy, oppression, exploitation, racism, and sexism?
Thank you, colleagues, for talking about the legacy of the African Studies Department and African Studies across campus in general. As an anthropologist and archaeologist, I come from it from a different perspective sometimes. And so what I can add is for the future students, there's a couple of things I want to do. I want to look at how do you look at the past, not through a colonial legacy, but there's different perspectives and different ways of doing that. And so archaeology, a lot of archaeologists feel that the process itself is a decolonizing process, because a lot of our understanding of the past comes from primary records written by colonial travelers, people in the military, collectors of the African heritage past, African materials. And so as an archaeologist, if I train students, they can connect to the past within 1 degree. And so I've worked with a lot of young students, like kids, 7-year-olds, they come out to the excavations, as well as Howard students, as well as grandparents. My Nicodemus work covered everybody from 7 to 98. And it could come out for a day or for an entire field season. And the message I took away from that is that when somebody has a tangible physical element of the past in their hands, they're connecting to that. That's a sensorial sensation in which it gives them a different understanding and link to the ancestors and a link to their past. So I've had kids come out and they say, oh, we hate archaeology, it's dirty, we don't care about the past. But then they hold an artifact that was a toy of a child of a pioneer African-American family in Kansas, or my students on Kinti Island. Think about, they were actually physically on an island in which somebody was taken away and left the continent. And they're holding something that was a remnant from their diet or something that they created. Use of ceramic. Like, it could be a personal item. Sometimes they'll find a bead. For them, each individual out there, it tells a story. And it has a different meaning for them. And you can see the light go on in their eyes. And then because we're on Kinti Island, we get tourists from around the world who are constantly asking them, what does that mean to you? Or what's the story here? What are you doing here? It's great to see Howard students on Kinti Island. We want to see more of that. And so for my task is to give more sensorial and experiential experiences to students and to convince administration that anthropology and archaeology has its role. It doesn't have to be a colonial perspective of the past, but that there are ways to cut out the colonial voices and interpretations of the past and link descendants directly to the remnants that people left behind in the past. And so that's the beauty of archaeology, and that's also how we can look at the legacy of our department as being an activist, but also through archaeology you can elevate the beauty, the benefits, the contributions of Africans and people of the diaspora, and to also recognize that everyday, daily experiences really have a role in defining identity. You know, I walk here into the Smithsonian and I see a toy that was created by a child. I did my dissertation in South Africa in the Eastern Cape, and I used to see those children making toys of telephone wire or plastic bags. They made baskets and elaborate things. And here it's now in Washington, DC in a museum. And it takes me back to the first day that I did my dissertation research there. And I said, I'm affiliated with the Albany Museum. It was a local museum. And many people were like, what is a museum? They'd never been to a museum. And I said, well, you know, it's where our heritage is preserved. It's where our stories are told. It's where we understand local events or major events. And many of them replied to me, we keep our own history. We pass down our own items of significance, and we reuse them and we make them our own. And so, you know, and I started my dissertation research right after apartheid ended in the late 90s. So there was a very distinct difference between where the museums were located and where the local communities, where I was working. I lived in the townships and then I worked in rural areas. So they never even, there was no connection between the two. And the Albany Museum was definitely at the time a very colonial experience and colonial, it was a colonial view of South African Black past. So in a nutshell, I'm arguing for archaeology and anthropology to come back, even though African studies is my home, I integrate it, and then I want to elevate the fact that the beauty of this department is it's very interdisciplinary, and it's really been inviting to me and made me feel like I'm part of the family when anthropology was closed. So I want to thank my colleagues.
Before I respond to the question about the courses in African studies, I want to go back a little bit to offer two apologies. The first is my choice. I don't expect that when I'm talking to Africans, I should be Western attire. The second apology is the language I'm using. I spoken at the OA in Addis Ababa. And all the African heads of state, they were looking for microphones for translation. He was sending a message that after 60 years, after years of independence, independence means you should speak your language. Because language is the vehicle of culture. Then I go back to Molefi Kete Asante, when he met with Sheikh Anta, the renowned African philosopher. He asked me a question, what can we do to defend Africa? I said, no, Africa does not need to defend. So my challenge to African studies, how are we advancing? In UNICEF, he said there is no African university on the continent of Africa. There's nothing. What we have is pan-European university in Africa. Because as the booking of you said, we are not yet decolonized from America, including the Philippines and the Caribbean. So my challenge for the course is, we published a book in 2018 titled Black African Communication Theory. You can Google it, it's there. Black African Communication Theory. Why? We noticed that in our dissertations, we were harvesting Eurocentric theories to solve African problems. It's a shame. I wrestled with arguments as my defense. And when my Indian professor said, what are you discussing public sphere like I dealing with immigrants? I almost failed my defense. Until the only solution I might find my family jumped in, putting at immigration in chapter 5. What if the reported report have prosperity theories in African text because like I said, as a deputy professor in this African universities, the students are asking questions. You said you took a gratification. I tell them that people are not Afrocentric theory. Where are they? What have the Africans in the diaspora done to follow the footsteps of the W.E.B. Du Bois? In 1945, African Congress, that stood and fought for the independence of Africa. They will speak on our graves because we have not fully the legacy. You speak of the African solution, I see that. I visit the continent every now and then. But I see the footsteps and the cry of family of individuals. But the invitation of European cities. And one of my PhD students are being event. Even the ability in Africa. We're coming the parts from our homes in the beach. Really. But where is Africa? Maybe. In the next 60 years, the third Africa will pass the definition. I started by apologizing with my dress. I apologize my language. You are struggling to speak to Swahili in Nairobi. Everybody's fighting to send their children in international schools. Where are we? I look at the billboards, the signboards in the city in English, everything English. But when you see the Chinese billboard, it starts with Chinese, followed by English, with little analytics. The font is very, very tiny. We have our big signboard, the teacher comes back, where is Nairobi, where is Cape Town, English. The third one is coming back to what she was looking at the language of the American conference of 2000. 23 years after that American conference. We sit and we swear. And we Africans.
In that vein, finished rereading Haile Armand's big novel, The Resolutionaries. He's making these points, as last night said, you know, Armand's on there. He's in Senegal now. He ain't never coming out there. Every time I email said, "Oh, we put you on a video. We can Zoom." Said, "Man, I'm 80-some years old. I'm gonna spend the rest of my time doing this work." That's almost what it has to be. These places should be on the periphery of the work, not the center. And it's very glad you raised how they curate this idea of preserving memory. Museums are, we know what they are. You know, they're records of conquest. This is how great we are. Look, this is how people we, and then they narrate things, and we're fighting in those museums. We're decolonizing as well we should. At the end of the day, no, the university itself is a model for colonization and violence. The Black University is a blackface model. of colonization and violence. And by centering it, we want people who have been victims of this violence to aspire to get here. That doesn't mean we don't have a role. The role's on the periphery. Today's Wednesday. 2 weeks ago, today, was in New York. The National Park Service commemorated the 20th anniversary of the New York African Burial Ground. And they asked me for a libation because for many years, we would take our freshmen at Howard University College of Arts and Science to the burial ground. So they took freshman seminar for us, from us, in another neoliberal blackface act. I don't believe in filter, because at this point, 50 years old, I'm how much longer I got on the planet, so why not speak truth? Because liberation work is messy. And you might offend your master. And that's the last thing you want to do at the university, offend your master, you need your check. But anyway, I'm raising it because while we were there, they look at us like, this is the place. When Herbert Daughtry, who's now 93 years old, spoke at the thing, And how many people here remember when those ancestral remains left where anthropology was, Mark Mack, and Michael Blakey, and of course, Mack is an ancestor. We named that trip for Mark Mack for years after he lost his life. And took them from Douglas Hall, where y'all were, to the chapel for the first of a series of rituals of return. Those 419 skeletal remains in caskets carved in West Africa, lined with kente. And folks danced, and the president of the university spoke, Eleanor Traylor did a poem, and elders who lay down in front of the bulldozers in Lower Manhattan. Elders who they had a committee to select the elders that would come to Howard to begin the ritual. And they went from here to Baltimore, from Baltimore over into Wilmington, Delaware. From Delaware, they went up into Philly, from Philly to Jersey. Every place they had a ritual. And then they stayed up all night drumming and dancing. And then when they reinterred the remains, it was such a powerful one, Cicely Tyson and Delroy Lindo and Maya Angelou, so many others. They asked me 2 weeks ago today, so where y'all doing at Howard? I guarantee you, this is the first that's been brought up on this campus. Institutional memory is what allows human beings to have some form of collective identity, not just people living here, but everybody who came before and who's coming after. Museums are places for intellectual warfare. Communities is where institutional memory is kept. Doesn't mean we can't use museums, but they should be on the periphery of our work. So what can African Studies do here? Partner with everybody else on the campus through things like the initiative that the center does with school teachers. Isn't there an initiative with school teachers? Exactly, except it should be outreach. It should be, this is a service we're providing inward to the community. The community should be the center. See, the outreach model presumes we are the ones that should be at the center. We should absolutely be on the periphery. We should absolutely be on the periphery. No African university. To grow up in Kenya and not have heard of the civil rights movement, when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I got a chance to see Matthew Jones before he made transition at the 50th anniversary of SNCC, and I asked him, hey man, tell me about Ogingo Dinga. This was the song Ogingo Dinga that they wrote when the Kenyans sent delegates to Atlanta, and the white boys in Atlanta was like, we don't really have racism down here. And then, so the SNCC students, many of them were our graduates, Charlie Cobb and they went and sat in at the Peachtree Manor, but they wanted to meet with Oginga to tell them they lied. And they wrote the song, we went down to the Peachtree Manor to see Ogingo Dinga. And they sang this song. The police said, what's the matter? To see Ogingo Dinga. The police, he looked mighty hard at Ogingo Dinga. He got scared cause he was an ex-Mau to see Ogingo Dinga. Freedom, teaching the language of sweat. Now, Charlie Cobb and Bob Moses ended up in Tanzania. When you see the Alpha Project here, if they brought that back, Bob and Janet Moses and all them, Charlie Cobb, they came back here with that. Courtney Clark's still in this community. So let me start with this. African Studies and partner with every other department on this campus to see what are the resources. Because the story I just told y'all, I guarantee y'all, Sykes knows that story in music. Where am I? We got English department, world literature, they know that work. If we just meet and have conversations, we only have departments so that Negroes can get jobs. History can talk all they want about being Afrocentric, but when they go to the American Historical Association, they want to see a PhD in history. Right. African studies can talk about being Afrocentric, but when they go to the job fair, they gotta see that you publish in the right journal, what's the metric. You know, I know what I'm talking about. She back in there. I got an independent publisher trying to get in all. She goes to all the meetings. Fine, because I'm black as hell, but I know you gotta have this mother-made driver's license, fill in the blank approach to your academic work to get your check. There is no discipline. Why I advocate for us to have an African Studies separate because we thought we'd get a few Negroes together and create a discipline. A discipline is about how you approach a subject, not what you're studying. A discipline about methodology, which begins with language. The reason we have Mario Bay here who teaches Egyptian hieroglyphs is because if we start with that language, that's what our laws writing about in the resolutionaries. You can take all the other languages that Africans speak and try to begin to connect them to one of the oldest human languages there is. Dr. Wyatt and I just came back and gave it for the second time. Once you do that, how would you do that today? Without scaring anybody who don't want to lose their check. You know, stay in your little straitjackets and fill out the paperwork. It's not a problem. But intellectually, we can do that work. And then when they have a fight like AP, African American Studies, when the AME Church, which has started to organize community classes, comes, we can offer them the same thing we offered the New York African Burial Ground. When those elders stand for the bulldozers and they take those bones to Pace University and black people like, hell no, black hands will touch this. And they said, well, where the hell are you gonna find enough black people to be able to do this research? And you know what they said? Howard University. People look at us very differently than we act. We should start acting the way people look at us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So one question for the road. You want to know, thank you.
Yes. Particularly in terms of partnerships and collaborations across to begin to have a different lay of the terrain. In 1982, I believe, if I recall correctly, Howard was the institution that was selected by the African Studies Association to host their annual conference. And at that time, I think it was Bob Cox, who was the director of the program here, who selected Bob Edgar. Is he still there? But Bob Edgar and Ntalaja Zongola to be the sort of scholars, you know, convening the conference. And the theme of the conference was basically relations between Africans and African Americans, African studies and African American studies. And there were a series of very high profile panels. And I believe I still have the tapes, the VHS tapes. I have some tapes. I mean, it's coming to my mind now. I have to believe that they were somewhere, they're somewhere, but I think I don't have those tapes there. But again, that marked a very seminal in the history that I was trying to talk about, dating back to 68, you know, with that conference in Montreal, where you had these encounters and this push to really begin to break the boundaries that had been erected, that were sort of ordering and just policing what African studies was at the up to that particular time there. So that particular moment brought together scholars from Africa and African American scholars, to really discuss strategies and ways of really connecting, establishing those connections that Esther was also mentioning, are really imperative in terms of beginning to put together, sort of different perspectives there. And I believe it was also, it was one of the first ASA meetings that also really projected in a very, very high profile manner, put in place in the program in ways that it has never been done before. The idea of these different approaches, certain other practices, certain other ways of creating knowledge that Lucia, I think, mentioned before, the building on that with hip-hop, studies and other sort of non-traditional methods of delivering knowledge and producing knowledge. But in '82 was the first time that at the African Studies Association meeting, basically through what we were doing here at Harvard, that we profiled the work of filmmakers, brought together, some high-profile filmmakers from Africa, African American, and Caribbean. The few that were on the train at the time, to bring them together in this conversation that began to really expand the notion of what Africa is, not just continental Africa, but began to see in this global perspective there. So I think those were really very, very key moves, that Howard was centrally involved in. And earlier I was talking about some of the new things that I've realized in the past couple of years. And most recently, in my listing, in what we say, when you begin to list, you will always make a mistake. You will always exclude. But in my listing, I neglected to mention the homecoming also of one of our illustrious graduates, who's, she's looking like Professor Cassandra Vallée, who is joining us, here today, and she is back on campus, hopefully, eventually, with the husband, Paul Zereza, who I think did he speak this morning? Yes. And again, Paul's work is really quite groundbreaking in terms of African studies and connecting Africans and African Americans and wider people. So I think these are really very exciting developments that again we can begin to do the kinds of connections that Greg was talking about here, begin to push forward. And just just ignore some of the noise coming from the periphery, from the other side there, barriers and other these things. To me, it's really a waste of energy. Let's just focus on building. I think we have a really very dynamic, exciting group of scholars on the campus here, who are really carrying the baton forward, building and offering new courses, expanding, the perspectives, and that's the kind of those are the kinds of projects that I think, we really need to concentrate our efforts on and just push forward, and not be sidetracked with all of these other things. They're important to engage, definitely, but I think not to really center them in ways that begin to push us in different directions.
I will follow on this data. Yes, I think the main point that comes out of the legacy of Howard as the exemplary HBCU and how it's defined now, how to define culture, not just for people of African descent, but for the world. How the movements in the liberty movements, the Harlem Renaissance, I always get a kick out of a quote I always read sometimes. Langston Hughes, when he said, he relates about Billy, about the smokes, and then finally he says, and as Black people, we know we are beautiful, and if white people agree with us, we'll be happy. If they don't, it's okay, we don't need their permission. And you have 60, 70 years down the road, people watching their thing, to white people, South Korean and Chinese women, and increasing their size to have that model. So what they did here was challenge the defining definitions of not of beauty, of democracy, of institutions, and do this in connection with the community. That was I have this quote from Chief, one of the presidents here, who said, all universities, he mentioned Harvard, they have the luxury to concentrate on a few things and not be concerned with what's going on in the world. But we're hard. So here we're concerned with the everyday living conditions, with issues of justice globally and locally. So that's what happened. And this was done by one defining knowledge as not something that a few people with certain gender or class or race would sit in a room and spew, but that comes out of the experiences of millions of people, out of the experience of people of African descent, not only in the continent, but around the world, where people of African descent came here as people from Asia, from India, went as with some computer with into the Silicon Valley. They came here, British, with knowledge of planting, knowledge of the seasons, knowledge of vaccinations. So to show that what the institution here and the scholars here showed was, one, we don't have to position the knowledge as a gateway where they have to tell us what to be, what to be, but also to see this global knowledge, what we grew up with, the global fund of knowledge. Africa, people of African descent have contributed to knowledge. What Western is nothing but global. And the challenge is to make sure the connection to the universal, in particular, this what I forgot to say. But you find the universal in a grain of salt, the universe in a grain of salt, meaning how there is interactions. So the knowledge of African descent has value enough with climate change, with environmental degradation, with conflicts, pushing humanity to destruction. There are values in showing this and other cultures, language, not just to say we don't speak English, but like Africans speak English, Americans speak Swahili and Zulu, and they have that global thing where we're engaged in the world, not only to uplift the conditions of people of African descent, but of the world, because they have shown that people of African descent were at the root of global transformations. The Industrial Revolution was financed by people of African descent. Karl Marx pointed out when cotton was the base of the Industrial Revolution in England, in Europe, without black skin, no Industrial Revolution. So it shows how the impact has been on the economy, on politics, on culture, on spirituality, and to position this both in the way as Brother Greg and the others have been pointing out how we will be immersed in using that tradition of involving with the church, with different groups, with and affirming the truth and the validity of the culture, the music, and the knowledge system, as well as having values only for people of African descent, but for the world. Because it might be that these traditions might the only ones that save humanity from the way the famines and the droughts and are bringing humanity to the point of extinction. Thank you.
Because we are at time, we have to wrap up. I would like to extend a warm thank you to our esteemed panelists, your contribution. Can we please give them a warm? We're gonna ask Dr. Clark to come up to give closing remarks. We're gonna hear but I'll let him have that.
No. All right, how are we so far? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, alumni, current students, family members, friends and partners. I hope when my birthday happens, it will be at least 1/10 of the dignity and pride of what we have accomplished here. We are only 70 years old once in a lifetime. And African Studies at Howard University is 70 years old this year. And I believe strongly that what we have done, what we have witnessed today, since this morning all the way to now, speaks very eloquently about who we are as people of Africa identity, African descendancy, who we are. And being the proverbial new kid on the block, because this is my 6th year here, let me tell you that I am absolutely proud to be part of this family, the African Studies family at Howard University. Somebody asked me, actually, Professor Zeleza asked me the other day, how do you feel at Howard University? I said, this has been my first HBCU, even though I have been in America since the 20th century. As a student, as a teacher, as many other things, all legal and legitimate. But one of the things I have learned here is that one, what we do here makes a more profound and lasting and needed difference. Because we are not disposable as professors, as researchers, as students, and as family members. And when we listen first to our student panelists, current students, reflect on their courses, how they're learning, how they are being challenged rightly by professors to make sure that you are Black, I'm Black. I'm not here to cut you corners, because if I cut you corners, I'm doing you disservice. I'm not raising the standard because you are my brother or my sister. Would I do that to my son or my daughter? No, I would not. So we're gonna hold you, the student, at the highest standard necessary and possible, so that when you walk on that stage with your diploma in you, you will pat yourself on the back and say, Okay, Dr. Cameron, thank you. Okay, Dr. Palmer, Dr. Jibril, Dr. Jam, Dr. Halo, everyone, thank you for being hard on me when it was necessary. I didn't achieve then, but now I do. That's how we want me to feel when we get there. And we listen to our alumni, many of whom now are part of our staff or our faculty. And listening to them and knowing that the pioneers who brought this department to where it is today, educate them, train them, well, coach them. Like the one who was great to political science and Dr. Young telling her, you come to African studies. She comes to African studies and she's proud today she came to African studies. And listening to our colleagues, current professors, reflect on the whole trajectory to where we are today. That gives us more food for thought. And I would like personally to thank Dr. Baichan. I know he doesn't want me to do it because he's very modest. I want to thank Dr. Baichan, the immediate past chair of our department. When I first came here, and I had, of course, read and asked questions, and I said, well, I don't know if I'm worthy of this. Because one, Dr. Baichan, the person I was replacing, I hate using the term replacing. And the immediate past chair that he had replaced, Dr. Suleiman Young. I said to myself, who am I to think that I can come after him? And that's the concept I learned, coming after them, not replacing them. By what? Seeking their advice, their guidance. And when I told Dr. Young and his wife, I'm afraid that I won't do well, his wife said, do your best. And God will do the rest. So, Dr. Chan, thank you very much. And all the colleagues in the department that have, thank you for bearing with me. Let me do it that way. And our students, our alumni, our family members, everybody, please know that we are very grateful for everything. And let's move African studies at Howard University forward in collaboration, as Dr. Carr and Dr. Chan and Dr. Amy and the whole panel explained here. African studies at Howard University is not just one department or one program. It's the family of Howard University. When we talk about African studies in a historically Black university, what are you talking about? You're talking about humanity. So thank you very much. At this point, I would like first to acknowledge the committee, the organizing committee members. As you can see, this event was co-sponsored, co-organized by the Department of African Studies and the Center for African Studies. And I would like, on behalf of all of you, to thank Dr. Krista Johnson, who's a professor in the Department of African Studies and director of the Center for African Studies. So she's wearing two hats in this event. And Dr. Anita Plummer, who volunteered to be also Dr. Tracy White, who is Tracy? Okay, she was here. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Anya Ueno of the Center for African Studies, who has helped very and Dr. Piwo Nyandu, the current Assistant Director of the Center for African Studies, also an alumnus of the department, just as Dr. Plummer and Dr. Wyatt. So it's the family, working for the family. I also would like to thank Mr. Clarence Smith of Fortex for the technological support to document this historic event. Mr. Errol Watkis of the Founders Library, who have helped facilitate the availability of this venue. And one of our graduate students, Danielle Lee, who did the research that supported this event. And also all our graduate and undergraduate students who volunteered and helped along the process all the way to now. I will not have the luxury to name them because I will forget some. And also the African Studies Graduate Student Association. Their leadership did an excellent job engaging our students. So on this note, with your permission, I'm going to declare the symposium portion of this celebration closed. Again, thank you very much.